All right. I don't see any attendees yet, so I might wait another second. See people start coming in. There we go. I'm starting to see people coming into the attendee list now. So welcome everyone to the Shift Connect conference. I'm Travis Nickel, one of the students in the conference course this year. On behalf of our class and our professor, Dr. Ren Thomas, pleased to welcome you to our youth panel event hosted by the School of Planning at Dalhousie University. At Dalhousie here, we are grateful to be able to live, work, and play on Mi'kma'ki, traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We also like to thank our university elder in residence, Jerry Musqua LeBlanc, for opening our conference with a blessing this year. She's done in previous years for us. It's always really great to hear from Jerry. She talks to us about the importance of all being treaty people, as well as giving us blessing and sharing knowledge with us. If you'd like to check out her blessing, it's on our YouTube channel from our first session, our Access to Food panel. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, the Atlantic Planners Institute, the Licensed Professional Planners Association of Nova Scotia, Turner Drake and Partners Limited, FBM, Fathom, ZAP, and the Dalhousie University President's Office. I'm pleased here to welcome Urban Minds, a number of people who are involved with Urban Minds. They are going to be moderating the panel as well as the panelists today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves after we move over to them. And just a quick few details before we get started. So we are using the Zoom webinar software. So this means that only our presenters can speak. So if you have any questions for any of our panelists, make sure to put them into the Q&A box you see at the bottom of your screen there. Feel free to upvote any questions that are in there that you'd really like to see answered. And Jane, our moderator, will get to them as best she can there. As well, we have a few other people from the Shift class here who are going to be taking notes and taking screenshots as needed. The session, I think Jane, I'm going to let Jane describe the timing of the session because I don't know exactly what they're up to yet. So I'm just going to pass it right over to Jane to get started.
Thanks so much, Travis. Thanks for everyone who was able to join. I know it's your dinner time, and I sometimes don't like to eat dinner in front of a screen. So thank you for joining us. My name is Jane, as Travis mentioned, and I am a project coordinator with Urban Minds and also the moderator for tonight's session. We'll be exploring youth perspectives on post-pandemic city building with Nathan, Adriana, and Jaskiran. And if you would like to put in the chat how old you were when you first found out about urban planning and what it was, feel free to do so. Okay, I'm just going to start screen sharing now. Okay, so, sorry, here's our outline. So I'll give a 5-ish minute introduction to Urban Minds, and then we'll have 3 to 5 minutes per panelist for them to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into the panel discussion and have audience question and answer period at the end. So Urban Minds began when co-founders Ryan and Angela saw a gap between youth, especially middle school and high school students, and those who make decisions about our cities, including designers, planners, and government officials. So they created the mission, which is to create new ways for youth to participate in city building. To address this gap, Urban Minds works in 3 areas: strategy and design, workshops, and the One-Up program. So for strategy and design, we provide the service to companies, municipalities, and civic organizations. And we prioritize the rules of youth engagement, such as welcoming youth as co-creators, treating them as experts, and meeting them where they are. In this slide, you can see an example where we worked with the city of Markham when they updated their 4-year strategic plan as a municipal government. And they were interested to know from the youth what their priorities were so that the different departments and agencies could serve them better. And to do so, Urban Minds designed a portable game booth and took it with us to the youth events and shopping malls. The second area that we work in is providing workshops, such as these city builder workshops, where we give an introduction to urban planning and design thinking that is fun and hands-on. And we work with our clients to customize the workshop to students' needs and level of learning, and also to support any course curriculum requirements or objectives. Third, we run the One-Up Youth City Builders program and the corresponding One-Up conference. So the City Builders program ran prior to the pandemic, and we worked with 12 high school chapters, pairing each chapter with a mentor in the professions of urban planning, architecture, and design to guide the students through design thinking processes throughout the school year. And this year, because of the pandemic related restrictions, instead of running the school chapters, we hosted a virtual design competition where youth created proposals for the playground space at Witchwood Barnes Park. So this is a photo from last year. We were lucky to have our conference a week before the lockdown, and these were our attendees. And then the second part of this program is the Leaders Lab, which is a 3-day intensive workshop with students. And we teach them about urban planning and about running the chapters at their schools. The third part is the high school chapters. And last year we had 12, as mentioned, and they each had mentors. And we are in the process of figuring out how to change this to the pandemic environment for next year. So this is an example of what they would do. Like they would have activity sheets guiding them to understand the site and users and identifying design challenges and prototyping ideas. Okay, now we get to move to the exciting part, which is meeting the panelists. If Nathan would like to start, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, my name is Nathan. I am just finishing up my undergrad degree at the University of Toronto in Human Geography, Politics, and Planning. I'm also the co-president of the Urban Studies Student Union. And some areas of focus in urban planning for me are cooperative and affordable housing, active transportation, and specifically like facilitating public space and community building in public space. I would say my guiding question going into urban planning is like, how do you create organic and supportive urban environments and communities that foster a sense of belonging in kind of like this isolated environment that we're in right now. And a little bit about myself. I teach part-time at my local synagogue. I play a lot of music, and I do urban Instagram like tours, historical tours throughout Toronto in my spare time.
Okay, Adriana, you want to go next?
Sounds awesome, Nathan, on those tours. I would want to check them out. My name is Adriana. I'm a grade 12 student based in Waterloo, Ontario, and I'm an aspiring civil engineer or urban planner. And I saw like a lot of your comments down below stating that the first time you guys got exposed to urban planning was in 20s and 30s. And this is a problem I found, that I didn't have any resources at school to expose me to civil engineering or urban planning. And so as a high school student, I wanted to change that. And so I joined Urban Minds to, inspire the next generation of civil engineers and urban planners. I was lucky because I come from a family full of civil engineers. And so I was exposed to those things early on, but I know that like my peers, they don't really know about the field. And so I got really passionate about engaging youth with Urban Minds, with the conference that you guys saw. And now it being virtual, it's a lot different to navigate throughout the virtual world. So I am helping build the One-Up Network, which is a prize-based platform for students to expose them to urban planning and civil engineering or architecture. And I'm part of the League of Innovators Accelerator with 2 other Urban Minds team members. And we're planning to launch it during September. So I have a lot of things on my hands right now, being a grade 12 student, like applying and also doing this stuff, but it's really, really fun.
Thank you so much, Adriana. And lastly, we have Jaskiran.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me. So for the last 2 years, I've actually taken on the role of Director of Internal Affairs at the Toronto Youth Cabinet. So basically a little bit about the Youth Cabinet. It's the official youth advisory body for the City of Toronto. And it essentially creates opportunities for our team to outreach across the city and action change through the province. So our leadership team focuses on various functions, including community safety, budget, transit, education, equity, and employment. So basically there's a working group who specializes in each of these areas, and then we lead that change throughout the city. So for my role, what's special about it is it really gives me the opportunity to oversee all of the initiatives, and I'm able to support all the working groups with different functions as needed. What I really love about my role is it gives me the opportunity to not only network, but also create an effective strategy to support growth and outreach throughout the city and even throughout the province of Ontario. So this really aligns with my passion of youth empowerment and being able to give youth a voice. Basically, my whole journey started when I was 10 years old because I really, really loved the idea of being involved in the community, but also having my voice heard. At the time, I did not know what urban planning was. And I really found out later, actually in my early 20s, what it really consisted of. And from that really led me to continuously volunteer and be a leader in the community to really help youth understand that there's value to their voice. And that's really where the urban planning aspect comes in, and really empowering youth to understand that, they need to take the opportunity to share what they have to say, because a lot of the decisions that are being made today have to do with their future and what's going to impact them. So it's great to be here today.
Thank you so much, Jaskiran. Okay, so that is our 3 panelists. I'm very excited for our panel discussion with you. Let me just stop screen sharing. Okay, perfect. And let's dive into the first question. So, how has COVID impacted your relationship to your neighborhood? And what impacts do you notice that the pandemic has had more broadly? For example, do you find yourself walking outside more or leaving your neighborhood more or less? Or do you try to escape the city altogether? I will open the floor to whichever panelist would like to speak first.
I can kick it off.
Okay, thank you.
So for me, definitely with COVID, I feel like I'm really confined to my neighborhood. So before, I had a really good blend of working in my city, which is Vaughan, and then also going to Toronto for my work. So I had a really good balance where I was able to navigate the two. But now with everything being online, from my work to everything I do, I'm basically really confined to my house, much like other people. And at the same time, also just due to the overall uncertainty that lies and the safety aspect of it, I find myself not trying to venture out anywhere else and really looking for, the closest store to me to buy my necessities, or, wherever it is. And even now, we were in winter, so it was even hard to potentially even go out and go for a walk. And that really, restricts some aspects. But I truly feel like being confined in one space, it really created that aspect for especially for youth of, we're so used to being able to have those opportunities to constantly be busy and be on the go, at least for me. And then to have that all shut down and now be in one place, you really realize the value of everything that's in your city, from parks to different community events, concerts, like everything that used to happen that was just a daily aspect of life has now become something where I'm like, I'm so grateful that I was able to attend that concert in 2019, because who knows when that's going to happen again. So I feel like for me, that's truly been my impact of realizing how much we should value the different aspects of our city when it comes to just being in one place all the time now.
Thank you. Yeah, I really resonate with being grateful for the previous experiences, like concerts, as you mentioned, and also trying to stay or find the nearest amenities that are in my neighborhood as well. Okay, Nathan or Adriana, would you like
Yeah.
to? Okay.
I'll pick it up. I miss my commute is what I'll say to start off. I live in an inner suburb in the northern part of Toronto, in North York, if anybody is familiar with geography. And my commute down to the downtown campus of University of Toronto was like a 35-minute buffer for me to kind of exit certain spaces like my home and kind of be prepared to like go into school in certain environments and things like that. And kind of like, I mean, apart from all the other qualms of online school, like it's kind of like the lack of having that time to prepare, whether it's underground on the subway or walking to campus, it's completely changed how I see my place specifically in the city. I will say that I am very thankful and immensely privileged to like live in the neighborhood that I do. I've got a commercial strip like about a 5-minute walk from my house. I've got ravine trails and a cemetery behind my house. So I have been able to like experience the green space and things like that as kind of like a refresher and stuff like that. But I think that is kind of like how I feel individually. Collectively, like I've been living in the same like 800 square meter bubble or this radius of 800 meters for pretty much the last 15 years of my life. And I have never ever seen as many people walking as I have in the last year. It is ridiculous. It almost has this feeling of like you're in a small Italian village where they do their late night like walks after dinner and things like that. And that's something that you'd never get in a North American city, let alone in suburban Toronto. So it's been really interesting to kind of see like how not only change for me, because like, you know, we're trained to look at the neighborhood and look at our cities in certain ways, but also just, you know, people who have, you know, don't intentionally interact with their cities are also like, wow, I really like walking kind of thing. So it's been nice in that sense.
Yeah,
I
I
can
also.
definitely.
Sorry, Adrian, I was about to,
Okay.
but go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to the commute part. Going to school, I always take the city bus, and I think that that's such like an integral part of my independence and like my community. Just taking the city bus in the morning, seeing new faces every day. Like I live in a student city, Waterloo, so I'm used to seeing a lot of students, you know, living the life I am, kind of cramming on their homework on the bus, and I'm listening to my music, and I see a lot of students walking around, and to me, like that was just a time where I could reflect, you know, stress about a test on the way there, but then kind of relax on the way back, and then I feel like when that was taken away, it was like just today I spent 4 hours doing calculus, and then I went back upstairs and you know, in the same house, just on my phone texting my friends, and it's just completely different, you know, mindset change where like I'm not interacting with my community as much. Like I'm not like I can't just go off a stop and go to the store and meet someone else on the street or something. It's just completely changed how I interact with people, and I've gotten to know a lot more people online. Being an introvert myself, it's nice to have my own time, but like it's like having those mental barriers and spaces in between your day really helps with my mental well-being and just connecting with my community overall. So that's definitely a point that I wanted to put out. And also the part where Nathan said like people are walking a lot more. That is definitely also true. Like my family is also European, so when they just love walking, and like we call it like a daily krug. It's just like you have to go on your daily walk, and seeing more people on the trails just like reminded them of where they came from. And it was really awesome seeing people discover new trails around their city. So even though like we kind of lost our daily commute, I think we discovered a lot more like spider webs of roads and trails around our city that kind of connected us in a way we didn't never had before.
I love that term that you use, the spider webs of the city. Okay. Does anyone want to reflect on what anybody else said? Or if not, we can jump into the second question. All right, second question. So how has COVID impacted how you navigate the city? We can go in the same order if we, Jaskiran, if you would like to start.
For sure. I think it kind of touches on the last point. For me, my biggest kind of form of transportation was driving to the local subway station and then being able to commute downtown from Vaughan. And that was really a blessing because of the whole development of extending the transit system to Vaughan to be able to have that commute. So I think, you know, now for the last almost year working from home, I haven't needed to go and actually take transit anywhere. So for me, it's really impacted it because it completely shut down my use of transit. I don't, you know, use it. I won't be using it until I need to actually go in and do my work in Toronto. So that would be what's happening for me.
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit different. My reasons for shifting away from transit are I have two immunocompromised people in my house. So for me, transit was a no-go from the beginning, just, you know, as a precautionary thing. And it led me to kind of turn to my bike. And I think my Strava app logged about 1,400 kilometers of cycling this year, which I'm very proud of, but also just like goes to show that, like, you know, it is possible to get around in these, like, you know, these sprawling North American cities and things like that. But I think more like, never mind the individual aspect, I think I was sort of helping out with like, it was supposed to be an overnight camp, but obviously didn't end up happening. And one of the things that they were asking me to do with my background in urban planning, it was a camp that I'd gone to for 10 years before, was to lead like these socially distanced like urban history tours with kids. And that was some things that I did and kind of like got to know more about the city. Like I had to do this research, you know, about neighborhoods that I had never been to or whatever. And it was kind of one of those things there. I think the way that I've interacted more with mobility in the city is to be more intentional and not kind of like stick my headphones in and like head down and walk kind of thing. And I think that's something that a lot of people could benefit from, is to just kind of like look up and, you know, take in and observe and things like that. And I think the intentionality has been something that has also extended into a lot of people's social lives, is that once you don't have that like seeing everyone at work or seeing everyone in class kind of thing, you make more intentional to do a games night or to video conference kind of thing with your friends. So it's been nice to kind of build up that aspect of my observation repertoire, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say I definitely use my car more often because of me not going on the bus anymore. So I still go to school going a hybrid system, so 1 week to school, 1 week not. And so yeah, so I have to take the car. And it's, I mean, like I do go with my dad, so he goes to work and he drops me off at school. But yeah, like it just takes away also that sense of independence. I mean, I do have my driving test tomorrow, but that's another story. But like, it's like for me as an 18-year-old, not having access to the wonderful, you know, LRT we have and bus we have because of sanitary reasons is also something that I think is a burden for me, because I want to go places by myself if I don't have a car, you know, all the time. And I think that people using more cars obviously leads to more greenhouse gas emissions and things like that. So something like especially during the winter months, using a bike for me was not feasible. So that's kind of how my transportation shifted a little bit. Now that summer's coming along, I'm definitely gonna hop on the Nathan train and maybe do some biking, but yeah.
if I could just add one thing, I think one thing that's given me pause and like cause for reflection is like how class, and specifically in Toronto, like the racial aspect of transportation. If you look at, there's a study that was done by a U of T professor, David Holchansky, where he looked at Toronto as being a city of three cities, where you have the first city as the wealthier, earning 20% or more of the median income, second city being the middle class, the median income, and the third city being earning under 20% or 80% of the median income and below. And if you overlay that with a map of where cases of COVID have been tracked in Toronto, they're almost identical. And how race and class have kind of like intersected in a way to basically push people, specifically in Toronto's northwest end, but also in an area like Scarborough, which does not have any rapid transportation whatsoever, how they've kind of been forced. They still have to go into work because, you know, they're usually the essential workers that have been kind of put on the line and, for lack of a better term, sacrificed to make this city run.
Yes, thank you. I have take a look at, I've seen that map pop up on my social media feeds as well. And yeah, it's really noticeable how all these things have intersected, as you mentioned, Nathan. Okay, moving on to the third question. What changes do you think need to be made in your neighborhood to make it more livable during COVID?
My approach for this question, I'm kind of going to take the lens of the work that I do, which is more to do with youth voices. And I think one of the major things that can be done is engaging youth. I think in a lot of communities, like specifically like different cities, there aren't really outlets for youth to be able to input their opinions. So for example, in my city, at the beginning of COVID, that's when a youth council was reinitiated to kind of get that input of, you know, what issues do youth find important, and you know, where do we identify different areas that impact us essentially. So, you know, the Toronto Youth Cabinet has been around for a long time, and that's always been an outlet. But even with that, what we're trying to do is push more people to be aware and for youth to know that it actually exists. But in other cities, I see a lack of that. I see like Toronto being kind of a central place for that engagement to happen. But all the other cities that are around Toronto, how are we taking that opportunity to tell youth, you know, your voice matters, and these issues that are happening with COVID, you're not alone. Especially now, like one of the topics that we discussed in Vaughan was mental health. How much of a toll mental health is taking on youth specifically, and that really calls for a conversation about how are we listening to youth, how are we starting those conversations, and how are we really building that sense of community. Because I think a big part of like urban planning is connecting to community and building that community. It's necessary to listen to the different voices that come along with that.
I like unequivocally agree with that. I think the long-term psychological impacts of how this, and maybe Adriana can speak to this, like last year specifically in Ontario, there were a lot of strikes province-wide. And then to have, you know, you go on March break and then you kind of are just like, all right, well, I'm not going to see my friends for another 18 months at the least, kind of thing. Like, I can't even imagine that. It was hard enough at university as it was, and as it still is. I can't imagine, you know, having to adapt and do those things. But I think something from a more like, I guess, technocratic sense that like I've noticed, and I've been a big proponent of this for a long time, is making communities walkable, in the sense that in Toronto, it's like illegal as of right to zone like commercial and retail uses in like quote unquote stable neighborhoods, which has led to areas of Scarborough being completely unwalkable to like get out to a grocery store or a pharmacy or things like that. And I think introducing, I'm not going to talk about the density stuff with this kind of thing, but I think introducing more mixed uses into minor arterial roads, I think would be something that would be really, really cool to see. That would give money to local businesses, because like local businesses usually can't afford to rent out space in these large podiums in these brand new condos that are popping up in Toronto. So if you build either purpose-built rental or, for example, a cafe, a dog groomer, and a pharmacy, like on minor arterials, it might be something that like the community could use and make it more walkable.
Yeah, I definitely make my town more walkable, because now that a lot more students or just general public are just staying in the city, I saw like the one street, we have like one uptown street in Waterloo, and it has like 3 or 4 like main patios for the summer, and they were so packed during the summer. Like people are so close together. Some were not really even wearing masks because they're students, they don't really care. And so for me, it's just like, okay, well, maybe we should increase the number of patios. What they've been doing in Toronto, I know, and like York, they've been adding patios, which is nice. But also making that more of like a long-term thing. So even after kind of like reducing traffic lanes, and then increasing space for sidewalks and things like that. And also in the universities, like I've noticed that, like I know that University of Waterloo kind of owns its property, but putting more pathways around the campus and things like that, putting more bench areas, because now that students will be kind of slowly returning back in the fall, like a lot of universities, like they need a lot more outdoor areas. Obviously it's winter for like half the year, but student-friendly just gathering places that are outdoors, with like umbrellas. Like I went to Stratford during the summer, and they had just like a very small area with like umbrellas and picnic tables, but literally just picnic tables and umbrellas in a park is all people need to gather and stay socially distant from each other. We have a lot of parks in Waterloo that I know that we could just add a couple picnic benches to, and that'd make like a lot of people's days a lot better.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I do know that the city is attempting to pilot some curb lane closures. So I guess keep your eyes out on that. I know, for example, the Reimagine Young area, which is uptown where Nathan was mentioning, they are trying to pilot a curb lane closure, changing both lanes on the edge to a bike lane. So hopefully the city will have more streets looking like that soon. Okay, the next question is, has COVID impacted what spaces you see as valuable to a city?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I really think green spaces and parks, at least in my eyes, were so underrated until this past year. You know, when you're really confined to one area and you go out and explore and see what's available to you, you really realize that during that drive by, when you just passed by a park or you passed by a certain trail, you didn't realize the value that held, because you were simply just going on your commute to work, back home. It was just kind of a repetitive cycle. For me, when I finally now got the chance to safely go out and, you know, walk around and explore my neighborhood, I found trails and I found different areas that I didn't even know existed. I've lived in Vaughan for over 17 years, and there was this one beautiful hiking trail that I never knew existed. And when I told my friends, they were like, really? Like, that's like a main trail, you never knew that? And I'm like, I didn't really take the opportunity to go out and explore that. And I think it really, times like this really show us that, you know, many cities do have that accommodation for really beautiful green spaces, parks, but there are different areas of the city that require the same attention. And or also looking at areas that are super popular. So if you look more in like the downtown Toronto region, even last year, some of you probably saw Trinity Bellwoods. As soon as it was a beautiful day, the first beautiful day of the year, Trinity Bellwoods looked like a concert. Like there was no space in between individuals. Like everyone just kind of showed up. And it was because we were stuck inside for so long that I guess everyone just wanted to go out and have that opportunity. But that's a perfect example for city officials and government to see that these areas, there are certain areas that are more used than others, but there's certain areas that need more attention. And that was a prime example of showing that that space isn't wasted. It's utilized by individuals, it's wanted by individuals. And that kind of attention needs to be allocated to different areas of the city to disperse, disperse the amount of people that are gathering in one area. So for me, it would definitely be looking at an outdoor perspective of the green spaces and parks.
Yeah, I mean, green spaces, I am a firm support. Like, I truly believe that like access to outdoor recreational space should be a human right. But on top of that, I think using Trinity Bellwoods as an example, because I think for the specific like that fateful day, that fateful Saturday where everyone wasn't masked and the mayor ended up showing up and it was this huge social media thing in Toronto when it happened. I think it's interesting that like we look at spaces and we see like who uses them and which space and which uses are valid. Trinity Bellwoods has long been an area where like Toronto has always had this like Toronto the good, a very Puritan city, and like drinking is like not something that's like okay in city parks. And Trinity Bellwoods is like one of the main places that you can do that. And one thing that I read it, I think in the Toronto Star about, there's a significant encampment present in Trinity Bellwoods. And why is it that, you have these people who live in and around the area are drinking with their friends on a Saturday afternoon. But the second anything happens with the homeless folks who live in Trinity Bellwoods and call Trinity Bellwoods their home, it's kind of one of these things that like gets brought up about, should we have like encampments in parks and stuff like that? And I think how we see space, like never mind like what I've seen taken for granted, I think how the city has seen space is something that's really changed for me, and about what uses are acceptable and what uses aren't. And who is like making do of that use. And another example that I can think of that like was just a really wonderful experience for me was on one of my bike rides down the Don River, which is in kind of the central east end of Toronto. One of the trail passes by an area called Thorncliffe Park, which is an area that has it's like a lot of newly arrived immigrants to Toronto live there, high density. And a lot of people from Bangladesh, from North Africa, East Africa, and the Middle East live there. And I have this vivid memory of like biking through there on a Friday night and just like smelling this food. And it was one of those things where it was like, this is what public space should be used for. It shouldn't just be for throwing a Frisbee around with your buds. It should be a space for people to congregate and like build community. And that's not to like throw shade on other uses and everything. But I do think at the end of the day, there is this like underlying need that like people like want to be able to like have these like emotional connections that aren't just like, I'm going to get drunk in the park with my friends on a Saturday kind of thing,
Yeah, definitely. Like I just love seeing people like barbecuing. And in some parks it's not allowed, but when they do put a barbecue, it's nice just smelling the food and seeing a lot of people gathering around and enjoying the sun. I'd say one of the saddest things I was driving last week, and it was downtown Kitchener, and like the whole stretch of like small businesses was just closed and it was for sale. And I was like, it's really important to have these small businesses, like these small boutiques. Like I used to get dresses from this one small boutique and now it's closed. And I used to get books from this bookstore and now it's closed. And I used to get like organic food from like organic soaps from this one, organic shop. And it was nice to just to smell the soaps and go and check it out. And so those small businesses being closed kind of takes away from the experience of walking downtown. I used to go down like downtown with my friends and go thrift shopping and check out these cute shops and things like that. But without those people, then what's the point of walking downtown to just go to like Subway or something? Because you can go Subway anywhere. So those unique businesses that were quintessential of like Waterloo or like wherever you are right now, I think are just, we're just kind of stripped away. And there's been some support by the government, but it's just, it's kind of, it was inevitable for them to close down because no one was really buying. They didn't really know about online shopping fast enough. And so, yeah, right now it's really sad going downtown or uptown and seeing them not really being there.
Thank you for bringing up both the parks, the public space, and who can use this space, and what is missing, or like what the idea of access to a space in response to this question. Okay, the last question is, what lasting impacts do you think the pandemic will have on the city?
Yeah, for me, so my background is specifically in business and entrepreneurship. So throughout the pandemic, I've really kept a close eye on small businesses and people who really been impacted by that. And it's like statistics show that women specifically have been hit really hard by this pandemic, along with marginalized communities. And just seeing that really brings up the conversation about what's that recovery strategy going to look like, and how are we going to bridge those gaps that are now identified, because COVID has really given us an opportunity. We always knew certain issues were lingering in society, but COVID's really given us that wall to now be like, this is happening, and it's really apparent that it's happening, and these conversations need to take place now because there's no justifying otherwise, because it's right in front of us. So I think, small businesses specifically, so many small businesses have been closed in 2020. A statistic I saw was, I believe 14% of business closures took place in 2020 across Canada, and that's in the 100,000s of businesses. And that's not simply a statistic, that's people's livelihoods, that's people's years and years of hard work that they put in to now just have it all be taken away because of the circumstance. So I really think it comes down to, this isn't something that's going to be recovered in a year or in 2 years. It's going to take several years for us economically to recover from this. But it's really a matter of now seeing, how are small businesses going to be supported? How are we going to be given the opportunity to remain open, and even the ones that closed to potentially reopen and be given that opportunity? So just to kind of put a visual on it, I wish I had the picture, but prior to this, I saw a picture of Queen Street West, and Queen Street West is really known for it's just really a really cultural vibe, going down there and being able to see a lot of different things in one area, and it just really makes you happy walking around and having that accessibility. And now seeing like every other store be closed, boarded up, or some people's local favorites be closed, it really takes away from that aspect of the enjoyment that you get from kind of being in an area. So for me, I think definitely putting a strong focus on how are we going to help small businesses recover, and kind of take that local approach to shopping as well.
For sure. And on the economic aspect, I think arts, like arts funding for venues, galleries, and things like that, like that's one of those things that is already chronically underfunded, like let alone like never mind the pandemic. And I'm as a musician myself, like there are tons where I played my first show in my first year of university closed, which is really sad. But I think more from a social aspect, I think like I'll go back to what I was talking about before about intentionality and being more present and purposeful with who you interact with and how you interact with them and what you want to do with that energy. It sounds a bit like esoteric, but I really do think that there's going to be this catharsis of like outpouring of support, of like, wow, like I can actually talk to you and see your face and like be able to pick up on social cues and not have to guess like, what does the bottom half of your face look like underneath that mask? I really think there's going to be a catharsis of like community building and organizing around specifically working class people and marginalized people who are like, you know what, like, we worked our tails off like for 4 months of hero pay at Loblaws or something like that. and like now we get nothing coming out of this pandemic, I genuinely think that there's going to be this like reaffirmed like coming together of people to demand more from not just their governments, but from just like the powers that be, whether it's their employers or whatever. Like I don't know. I'm hopeful. And I think what Urban Minds TO does of like giving university students the ability, or high school students the vocabulary to like name these things in like an institutional framework, which is another discussion in and of itself. But I think the ability to give young people the vocabulary to name things, to make that difference is going to be incredibly important moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. I think COVID is helping us appreciate our own community and city more, like we talked about. Staying in the city for about a year now, walking more in our city. So just appreciating our community and then appreciating our small businesses. We've been talking about small businesses more than we ever have before. Racial inequalities, things like that. And now I think like our generation is a lot about going someplace else, you know, during March break, going to Florida. This was supposed to be my March break. And now that we're all here, we've found things to do inside of our own city that, although it's not what we wanted, it's definitely a step back and looking at, oh wait, there is, you know, a cinema close by, but it like that I didn't know of. Oh wait, like there is this really nice trail that I didn't know of. And I think we'll just become more cognizant of our own community and strengthening our like Canadian economy, strengthening our relationships with people we've never or haven't communicated with in a long time. And we'll just become more appreciative. And as Nathan said, just a lot more, what was the word you used?
In context with?
More,
intentional?
Well, on that later. You will, yeah, whatever. It's okay. But like overall, I think like my word is just more appreciative in general. Yeah.
Yeah, I echo the sentiments that everyone has mentioned so far in terms of being able to explore my own neighborhood more and having a greater appreciation, as Adriana was saying, as well as seeing the inequities in access to space, the existing, and how Jaskiran spoke about how the pandemic has highlighted and made extremely obvious the conversations that need to be had, and the role that youth can play in terms of highlighting what we see as the issue and bringing our voices to the table. So this concludes the formal panel session. I'm just going to check the chat to see if there's any questions that audience members have for our panelists, please feel free to type them in. If not, if any of the panelists have questions for each other or additional questions they would like to ask on the topic of what youth can do in this pandemic, in the post-pandemic environment, and what your thoughts on post-pandemic city building. I'm rambling now, but
there's a question from Travis in the Q&A, and okay. I can answer it. The question is, thinking about Nathan's comment, although he said it's another topic, do you think that youth need to learn the language of institution, or do planners need to speak more in the plain language? And my overarching answer is a bit of a cop-out, and it's both. But I do think at the end of the day, the plain language is incredibly important. Being culturally literate, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in my planning education. And like going into communities. Last year, I did a course where we went into Regent Park, which was the first and I believe one of the only national like affordable housing programs in Canada. It was built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And throughout many decades of racial stigmatization and classism and elitism, it was kind of basically like pushed off to the wayside until people realized, oh wait, it's downtown, it's next to a bunch of streetcar lines, we should reinvest in it. And the kids who we were working with were grade 12 and grade 11 age kids. And they were all young Muslim girls who were from Somalia and Pakistan. And I think one of the big things about like speaking in plain language is like, it's not necessarily plain. I think it's more like understanding that like there is another world, and there you can find millions of op-eds about Gen Z and everything. It's another world to kind of operate in. And I think just entering into that space as not somebody from a consulting firm or from the government, I think is like really important, and interacting with youth just to be there. And see it, like never mind for academic purposes or professional purposes, but just to be there. And like, I think it's just a really important first step in like being able to reach out to youth, and making sure that they're included in this process. Because youth empowerment and teaching kids how to take responsibility over their space I've seen it work as a camp counselor. It is phenomenal. Like you feel amazing as an educator and as a leader, and the kids are set for life with skills that will be amazing.
Yeah, I think that like the language we should use is just knowing the problem. Like at Urban Minds, we give them a problem. We introduce them to some words. Like, okay, this is what a concept map is. But even if they didn't understand any terminology, they know what the problem they need to solve, and they act on it. No matter if they know nothing about urban planning before, they are able to learn about conceptualizing a design without even knowing why, or no, they do know why they're doing it, but with like without even knowing what they're making, they know why they're doing it. And so even as Nathan said, like I've been a camp counselor, and I actually, speak in French to these campers who know nothing about French. And they're trying to learn French in different environments, like playing games and playing sports. And some of them don't even know any French. So you have to use these like nonverbal communication strategies. And that kind of connects back to this, like when we bring these big firms and companies and that have all this, terminologies and rules about city building and city planning, that isn't the most important part. We're trying to engage youth in solving community problems, and that helps them stay engaged and continue to engage with Urban Minds in that way.
I definitely agree with what both of you shared. One way that I really see it is a quote that I really like is, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And the reason I really like that is because I think a really inclusive approach to getting youth involved is to be able to explain things in a simpler way. Because a lot of times when you're just learning about something or you're new to a specific industry, a big turnoff or a big deterrent can be when you simply are just given too much information and you don't know what to do with it. So I think as leaders in specific industries, it's important for those leaders to be able to break down information in order for youth to understand it and then be able to build their knowledge from there. So I think a starting point is really using that, you can call it simpler terms or whatever it is. I just think it's a more inclusive approach to teaching and to be like sharing knowledge for that, to build that level of engagement. And then from there, it's just a domino effect. Once you're really interested in something, you're going to want to learn more about it yourself. So for me, that's really the approach that I like to take with that.
Yeah, just adding my 2 cents, one thing that stood out to me in Urban Mind strategy is always meeting youth where they're at. So as Adriana said, we do give them some of these terms to help them understand. But for example, right now we are trying to do youth engagement through TikTok, which is something that personally I would have never thought to do. But then I came into Urban Minds and I was like, oh yeah, why not? Like, this is another tool that we can use and it exists and they already know how to use it. So we should definitely learn how to as well.
Yeah, I can definitely add that I spend a lot of time on TikTok, and I've learned a lot about the world on TikTok, especially during the early months of quarantine. Like, a lot of people say, oh my gosh, TikTok, what? Like, what are you using? Like, you're not mature or anything. But honestly, it's been one of the most engaging and enlightening social media platforms, just because like more people are more raw about world events, and I got to know a lot more about like things like George Floyd and stuff. So if and obviously we should take everything on social media with a grain of salt, but to me, like, those short like videos of just engaging content is what really engages me to do something and act on something.
I think if we don't have any more questions, we can wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, and Nathan, Adriana, and Jaskiran for joining me and contributing your very valuable thoughts to our panel. Travis, I don't know how these are usually wrapped up, but
I actually see a red looks like she's got a question. She's
Oh,
turned
okay.
her camera on. She wants to just
Oh
ask
yeah, I
it
did.
live.
Sorry. I think because I'm a panelist, I couldn't post it in the Q&A there. Sorry. But I was just one last thing about, I was just wondering, like, for youth, you know, who were involved in some of your guys' efforts there, like redesigning spaces in particular, that kind of thing. Because I know I've seen some examples of I saw you guys present at CIP in Ottawa, and there was even like redesigning an intersection and that kind of, you know, like so that it was a safer place to cross and that kind of thing. Do the people, like the students that you work with, do they ever get frustrated by like the amount of time it might take to like get a project actually built or that kind of thing? Or like, have they actually been able to see some of their work be, it seems like you have seen some examples of that with Urban Minds work.
Sorry, so your question is whether or not they ever get frustrated that their opinions or their efforts aren't coming into fruition?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in terms of actually things being built, like in things like parks or open spaces.
Adriana, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to take?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, I've only been part of Urban Minds for a couple of months, but I've been engaging with their past content for a long time, and so like as I mentioned before, we were collaborating with Witchwood Barns, and they made a concept plan to redesign their area. And what we do as Urban Minds is we have a lot of groups, like a lot of ideas. We have a winner, and so Witchwood Barns can really do whatever they want with those concept maps. They have like a new youth perspective, and oftentimes they actually implement that in or consider implementing those things in their new developments. It's obviously really hard to convince these private firms, which is one of our biggest challenges as of right now, to really trust these youth in their development process. But previously, we've had a lot of outdoor art installations, and such as Would You Rather. If you check out our website, urbanminds.co, you can see our previous projects. And our goal in the future years is to really get these organizations and civic firms to develop this trust with our youth. And the more competitions and the more design challenges we do, the more trust we get. And we're really seeing like amazing designs. Like, I've seen these concept plans just posted yesterday, and I was blown away by those ideas, because like my age group is just so creative and so willing to do these things. So it's really awesome to see what they're able to do, and hopefully see those bigger projects actually come into fruition. But yeah, like answering the question of whether it's like they get frustrated, our competitions kind of last maybe 1 or 2 weeks. And we keep giving them mentors and updates and support all the way through. So they're not really left on their own all the time. And so they're able to ask a lot of questions and problem solve and just think of ideas. So I've never really seen any of them like getting frustrated about like designing these kind of things. And if there is frustration, like in the end, there is a complete like state of satisfaction, just making something that actually has a purpose to their own community.
I'm also newer to Urban Minds, but what I can add to this is that I think the approach that we take when we work with clients is that we push them towards like seeing the youth as co-creators rather than just as somebody they're gathering opinions from. So we try and push them towards understanding that their ideas are just as valuable as everybody else's, so that when we ask youth for their opinions and for their thoughts on a project, what they contribute is actually implemented.
Yeah, that co-creator part is actually like part of our mission statement. Definitely, yeah, good point, Jane. I forgot to mention that. But just seeing youth, I think the main takeaway from this discussion is that there's been a lot of changes in the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have to trust these youth as co-creators because they are so important and they are the future of our cities. So when I become an urban planner or a civil engineer, I'm going to be doing a lot more different stuff. Maybe there's going to be more technologies. Maybe there's going to be another pandemic. You never even know. So we have to keep adapting. And like my generation has to be exposed to urban planning in high school, not in their 20s. So then they're able to, figure out whether they want to go in this path early on. And we need more people collaborating on these cities and making them a more inclusive and accessible space.
Also, in a more direct answer to your question, it sometimes is hard for youth to wrap their head around urban planning timelines because, or even not even just youth, me too, because we're talking about like decades sometimes it takes for something to get built. So for example, they'll be giving their opinion 1 month this year, and then they wouldn't see anything happen for another like 5 to 10 years. So navigating that bureaucracy of planning, the planning process itself takes time and patience, and that's something that youth are not used to.
Yeah, definitely. With like my short attention span and TikToks, it's a completely different environment of having to wait a long time to get things up and ready. Whereas virtually, I can just like make a website and it's just up and running tomorrow. So yeah, that's like the different thing, but I guess the ideation process doesn't really take too long.
Yeah, I found when I've done like taught classes about, like a plan or something like that, and it takes like a year or 2 years to develop a plan. Students in my class are like, oh my God, that's so long. And like the center plan for Halifax took 8 years to develop. So like 2 years is actually pretty short for planning, like to develop a planning document like that. So
it's still only halfway done in our plan.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like the timeframes are quite long. That's why I was asking that question. If to actually design and build something, even in a park, yeah, you can do small installation projects, and there's little, pop-up urbanism and those kinds of little projects that people do that kind of can come up really quickly, like within a few weeks, usually temporary installations though, so.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss any more questions because I didn't realize there was a Q&A section.
Yeah, I think so. You have answered Trout to this one that's answered. I think, yeah.
Okay.
So if there are no other questions, and Travis, you can wrap up, I think.
Yeah, thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Nathan, Jane, Jaskiran, and Adriana for that. Second year in a row, we've had a youth panel, and I've been super impressed and learned a lot both times. It's really great just to hear from the youth. So on behalf of the SHIFT conference and Professor Dr. Ren Thomas, we'd like to thank everyone for coming, our panelists, as well as all our attendees today. Please come to some of the other sessions we have left in the conference. We have 2 more days. We have some community engagement and a lot of arts and performing world and how that's changed, as well as some actual performances tomorrow and our keynotes on Friday. As well, the recording for this session will be available on our YouTube channel, hopefully by the end of the week if technology is on our side. And once again, thank you very much, everyone. See you later.
Thanks.